Peace and power, family. Dr. DAW back in the building. Special guest today, Brother Dayvon Love. Today, family, we're going to talk about FBA versus Pan-Africanism. Reparations talk. Family, make sure you come in, you like, you share, and you subscribe. Family, it's going to be a good one. I heard it through the grapevine. There's going to be a good one. My dear brother told me it's going to be a good one. I'm talking about my good brother. I'm just going to put his name out there. My good brother, Jabari Natur, said it's going to be fire. You know, so family, do what you got to do. And we'll be back on the other side.
When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Black and I'm proud. When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim you're African. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim you're African. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim you're African. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. Become a part of it. Embrace it. 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 When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim you're African. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim you're African. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you.
Family, family, family. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Conversations with Dr. DAW. Let's get in the building. Let's jump in. Special guests. We're going to have a good talk again, as I said, family, on the other side. FBA versus Pan-Africanism. Reparations talk. We have our dear brother, Dayvon Love, in the building. I appreciate him coming about and coming through. I think this brother is phenomenal. Him, his organization, his comrades, all the work that he is doing in the community in Baltimore, the state of Maryland, and beyond. So we're going to have this talk. And I want to ask the question. So, Brother Dayvon, let me see how I can set this up. Could you tell the people about yourself? All the things, what makes you, I like to ask the question this way, what makes you essential to the conversation? And what is your take? I know I'm asking a layered question, but where do you fall within this FBA versus Pan-African debacle?
Yeah. Well, first, really appreciate and honored to have the invitation to be on this platform. I think it's important, we talk about this kind of new age where social justice and Blackness is something that's out there. It's good to have places that have real substantive, long form, rigorous conversation. So I'll say a little bit about myself and then address the question about the FBA Pan-Africanism piece. So my background is actually in policy debate. So I did policy debate in high school and college. And policy debate is a unique form of academic debate. It's not, most people when they think of debate, they think of flowery oratory, right? They think of rhetorical flourishes. But policy debate is really more about rigorous argumentation, right? And it's very evidence laden. And in fact, the conservative revolution, right? So you think about the Cold War and the tail end of it when Ronald Reagan emerges, becomes president of the United States in 1980, that think tanks and civic institutions were a big part of the conservative revolution that was a response to the social movements of the 60s and 70s, Black power, anti-war, civil rights, women rights, gay liberation movements. And so what you have is in policy debate, those were in many respects the architects of the policy agenda for the conservative right wing. And so those are the unique skills that come from policy debate. I came into the activity in the early 2000s during an academic and intellectual innovation that came out of the Pan-African Studies Department at University of Louisville, where they challenged the approaches to debate, both using radical Black scholarship, incorporating what they called organic intellectuals, so like hip hop artists, combining that with personal experience, with the idea of producing the kind of rigorous argumentation that addresses the issues that people of Africanness and other oppressed people face. And that culminated in the team of Liz Jones and Tanya Green, 2 Black women, got to quarterfinals of the national championship tournaments, making those kinds of arguments. And then my college debate partner, brother named Devin Cooper, who's from Baltimore, he actually went to Louisville for 2 years, transferred to Towson University where we competed. And him and I in 2008 won a national championship, extending on that intellectual trajectory. In fact, that year, we won using the Black aesthetic. Mary Baraka, Larry Neal, Gail Addison, Sonia Sanchez, using with the argument being that the society is saturated in the white aesthetic, that the assessment of value and beauty is kind of is saturated in the cultural machinery of whiteness. And if we don't break that, then whether we talk about foreign policy, domestic policy, it's going to impact the lens we use to address ourselves to policy. And so when we were done with the activity, we knew that major public policy interests recruit from this activity. Right? Major think tanks and public policy entities. And so we figured in 2010, we will form an organization specifically occupying the public policy arena, but from a radical, revolutionary Pan-Africanist perspective. So because we were clear that a lot of people that have one of the criticisms that people have of Pan-Africanists is that it can be isolationist, right? Withdrawing from engaging a lot of these systems. And so we were clear that we were going to engage these systems of, American policy and politics, but from a vantage point rooted in the importance of sovereignty and self-determination, right? So that's kind of how I come, to the work. To the question, and this actually segues into the question of FBA and Pan-Africanism. And I'm gonna be honest with you. At first, I mostly ignored the FBA stuff because I, as a person who has rigorously studied our culture, our history, traditions, with a focus on our work in the political landscape. It's not a FBA. It's just not a serious approach to the work. It's just unserious. And so I mostly ignored it. Over time, I've come to develop an appreciation for engaging the conversation, and in part because what it tells me, the emergence of FBA as like a significant term or phrase, in the lexicon of Black struggle, its emergence signifies to me that there is a lack of true understanding of the nature of the society that we live in, right? And here's what I mean by that. See, we live in a society that propagandizes this belief that if we just participate in the system at higher numbers, right? If we appeal to the sensibilities of mainstream society effectively enough, then we can resolve injustice that Black people are facing in society. That is the propaganda that we're socialized into believing about the nature of how the world is structured. But that analysis is incomplete. The reality is the past 500 years of human history is marked by the project of European domination of the world, right? Every aspect of civil society, right? And so when you think about the European Enlightenment, right, where they coded all for the discipline of Egyptology emerges during the so-called Enlightenment period to theorize Egypt out of Africa, because they could not justify the enterprise of chattel slavery if Africans were a people who were human beings, right? Who were not inferior beings, like cattle in the way. And that when we think about how do you maintain a system, you have to have people believe that they are inferior, that the civilizations that Black people have didn't exist, in order to justify that the pathway into humanity is the European culture and civilization. And so what we had as people of African descent were civilizations, right? We had societies with medical systems and food distribution and education systems and transportation ecosystems. Like we had societies where we were not reliant on the benevolence of other people to meet our basic needs. So the intervention of the project of European domination of the world this past 500 years has robbed us of the right and responsibility to control the very institutions, the life-preserving institutions necessary for our people to navigate the society. That analysis is a contrast to the injustice analysis that I mentioned earlier, because if the problem that we're facing is that we are reliant on our oppressor to meet our basic needs as a people, and that's become normalized, then the solution then requires a pursuit of sovereignty. It requires us to build civilization, to build ecosystems of institutions so that we can interact with society on the basis of power and strength. What FBA does is that the analysis is based in the injustice analysis. This is a society that if we participate better, that if we appeal to the system better, that we can get what we're owed. And that's just not reality, right? That we were brought here as an act of war. And so if we are to be a formidable force, we have to have a nation mentality where we have the instruments that a people need to wield power. FBA assumes that identifying with America means that we are identifying with a birthright, right? And they often talk about like America being our birthright. But rights only matter to the extent that there's a power that can enforce those rights. America is white people's country. They control, own, and operate the major organs of civil society. And so if we are reliant on their ability to enforce our rights, that's a fool's mission, right? The goal is for us to build the kind of power where we make this society do the things that we need done. The problem is, unfortunately, not enough of our people have ever experienced wielding power that doesn't emanate from being sanctioned by mainstream white institutions or white society in general. Very few people have ever experienced wielding power that emanates from the base of our community as the source of its power. So when I think about FBA, what I'm clear about is that their essential theory of change, even if they say they agree with some of the aspects of the analysis I gave, the central theory of change of FBA is not about building the institutional wherewithal such that we can be an independent nation. We can operate as, and that's not their theory. Their theory is we need to be integrated into the American mainstream, and we have a right to be integrated into the American mainstream. And if we are sufficiently integrated into the American mainstream, we can get reparations. And that just the movement history of our people in this country, it's just a commentary against the validity of that theory.
That was beautifully stated. Peace. Shout out to Dr. Ball. I see you, and I saw you a little earlier. Thanks for coming by last week, and salute to you.
Shout out to Dr. Ball.
Yes, sir. You said a lot there. I mean, it was beautifully put. I think your debate skills. I mean, I know you said it's not the word you say flowery, and you still got a little bit of that up in there too. It's still very artistic. It's still.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, it's so you doing. It's like as my NGO philosophy talks about a both end. So I mean, to me, it's like poetry when I hear you speak, but it's also powerful. So we talk about the Black aesthetic, and I think that is from a Black African-centered perspective, even aesthetics are purposeful and powerful.
That's right.
So with all of that, you said, before we get deep into reparations talk, I'm curious to how you, because this is kind of like a sidebar, but it kind of speaks to something that's going on right now. I've been on a few people's platforms and actually having the discussion in class with my students. So I have it written here. I said, I'm curious how you think about Black historical boundaries, it being Black History Month. And I heard you all actually speak of ancient Kemet just now, and maybe some other civilizations in Africa, and how we're connected to that. But let me finish the question. It says, there's debate right now about whether Black History Month should be reserved strictly for African Americans. They actually say FBA, but some say African Americans, or whether it can and should highlight broader African and diasporic histories. How do you think about that boundary? So one, some people are saying, well, we shouldn't highlight anybody, even if they've done work in this country. So we should go to that level. And then others are saying, well, we should be centered And so we shouldn't, if we're not centered in the conversation, there should never be a conversation during Black History Month without tying it back to our experience here. So you can't, like, in other words, you can't set aside a day to say, let's just speak about the Haitian Revolution.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I mean, this might step on some toes. That sounds like people who haven't read Carter Woodson, right? The founder of Negro History Week that became Black History Month. He himself said that Negro History Week is not so much as a Negro History Week, but the Negro in history, right? That Negro history are the missing pages of world history. But put it another way, you think about the American cultural ethos, and when you look at whether it's legal terms, whether you look at the architecture of formal government buildings, they're modeled after Greek and Roman architecture and Latin, right, which is Roman ideals.
Yeah.
So what they're clear about is that there is no direct line genealogically between European civilization and ancient Greece and Rome, right? These are largely Black and brown societies, like, and so, but they recognize that in order to develop an intellectual and cultural personality that forms the basis for developing institutions that can reproduce itself, you have to have a historical referent that makes your contemporary identity make sense, right? So if we're clear that that is America's identity, cultural ethos, that they draw from ancient history as the basis for how it understands itself, these terms like democracy, that doesn't come from America. That's a reference to Greek ideas, right? The city-state, right, as a form of organizing political subdivisions. That's Greece, right? So the very contemporary ideas that for us are just regular natural ideas, their historical referent is ancient. So then for Black people, the same way that white folks use Greece and Rome as a historical referent for the basis of their cultural identity, that forms the basis of how they build institutions, for Black people, it should be the same, right? That ancient Africa, right, forms the historical referent that we should use to build our societies, to build our institutions, so that the frames of reference we're using are our own. So to the question about like history, it's all of it. It is our history here. It is our history on the continent. And anybody who actually study, if you look at sociological historical studies on the relationship between Black people here in Africa, there are a variety of things that are examples of African retentions that we see here amongst Black folks in the United States. I mean, a random example, Harriet Washington, her book, Medical Apartheid. There's a section when she's talking about the early history of the American medical institutions that they found that it was the medicinal practices that enslaved Africans brought with them here to the United States that were more effective at curing medical maladies than the formal medical institutions formed here in the United States in the early history of those industries. That's people of African descent. They got those practices from where we came from. Yeah. Right. So the number of examples of retentions of African culture amongst Black people, even Janita Smitherman, her book, Talking and Testifying, the habitual bee. I'm sure some of your listeners will be familiar with the habitual bee. We talking in slang, it's like, Ausar be wildin', right? And the bee, because in African linguistics, sociolinguistics, you are what you're doing. In European languages, what you are and what you're doing are separate things. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Right. But in African cultural traditions and approaches, the habitual bee. So if I say, because a person who would correct me if I say, Ausar be wild, Ausar is wildin'. Right. Right. But what you are is what you. So that's another. But in our slang, that's not something that like, we were around African cultural traditions and we picked, it is in our kind of natural language and how we talk to each other. But you only get that from the fact that it's an African retention. So all that to say that it is absurd for someone to say that you can study people of African descent, Black people here in the United States, and do so in a way that is intellectually serious without understanding Africa.
Yeah, I agree with that, because when these questions are posed to me, I'm like, how do you separate it? Like, in fact, like the fact that the people that are asking these questions at times are the very people who've come through the same schools of thought that I've gone through, and then they are now being let's say co-opted, in a sense. Their minds at least are being co-opted into these narrow, as Dr. Ball spoke about last week, narrow nationalists, meaning white nationalists, not Black nationalists. He said it doesn't even make it that far. Perspectives, views, and these defensive and protective ways of existing. I call it trauma, but
yeah. And if I can add to that, real just because I think, see, here's the thing. We have to be able to navigate a complex world. So is it true that there are African immigrants or other immigrants of color that have stigmas against Black people who were born here and whose lineage is here? Absolutely. Like that's certainly a thing that happens.
Yeah.
But the thing I often remind people is our own people do that to ourselves. Our own people have negative stigmas and stereotypes about, Black, and so I think that what happens a lot of times is people have legitimate gripes with the fact that, and I would also say this, it's also important to recognize the Black people who, whose ancestors were enslaved here in the United States, that we do have a unique culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? We have a unique culture. Now, to me, those culture is similar to the fact that you have a variety of different African cultures that vary and have different versions, different flavors. We have one flavor of the larger, spectrum of African cultural traditions and perspectives. So it is important for us to be serious about that. It reminds me of Alice Walker. She's got a pamphlet or book of short stories, In Love and in Trouble. And there's one, Everyday Use, right, where it's a story about a young woman who goes off to college. She learns all the dashiki down, learn all the African stuff, comes back home, and denigrates. They got the quilt, and so it's like denigrating the like culture of Black. And to me, that's an important short story, because it's like, we can learn all this stuff about Africa, right? But also respect what we have here.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the mistake that gets made from these FBA folks, is they take the fact that it is true that there are stigmas, right? But they make it's almost like creating an identity and a politics based off of, stigmas and stereotypes about Black people that, again, our own people do that to us.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's funny. You took me back so many years ago when I was in junior college, like so many years ago, when I read that in like a book of literature. For like an English, probably 110 or something. I don't know, 2 something. I don't know, some course. May have been like English 300 something. But nonetheless, 2 something. But in that same book, though, that Alice Walker piece was there. And it was kind of interesting because it kind of like took me back to my father, right? My father kind of brought me up in this African-centered, Pan-Africanist way of being and understanding. And you change your names, and you're telling your sister, you're telling your family that you have a new name, and we ain't eating pork chops no more, and so it kind of put me under that type of mindset. But in that same book, and I might say the African brother name's wrong, Achebe,
Chinua Achebe.
Yeah. In that same book, it has I think it has a shorter version. I might be misremembering a shorter version of Things Fall Apart as well, and it talks about how actually the colonizers came and gave their religions and their ways of understanding, and they also were looking down on the old ways.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's an interesting parallel there. That's right. So with that, I appreciate that. To kind of like set this conversation a bit, I want to ask you, how do you define reparations? Are we talking about financial compensation, land, policy shifts, institutional restructuring, or something else?
So I think it's important that the term reparations emerges from a very particular movement history, right? So I think, because sometimes I think when we talk about what reparations is, and people often detach it from where it emerged from. So you think about, for instance, Callie House, right? Established the ex-slaves mutual pension fund that would have been about compensating formerly enslaved Africans on a perpetual basis. It was a pension fund, so it wasn't just cash, right? It was sustainability, right? So then you have, Queen Mother Moore, right? Mother of the modern reparations movement, Garvey, the Republic of New Africa, Malcolm X Organization of African American Community. All of the most ardent advocates for reparations, it has come and emerged from a revolutionary Pan-Africanist perspective. That's the genealogy. So regardless of whether or not a person believes that or wants reparations to be in a different frame, it is the case that it emerges from that worldview. The demand emerges from that worldview. And so it's important then to have fidelity to the worldview that emerges from. So that being the worldview that it emerges from, then what that says to me when we talk about what reparations is, from that perspective, reparations is about investing in our capacity to practice sovereignty. Because prior to the intervention of European domination of the world, we had civilizations, we had societies. So we're repairing what we had before.
So can you say investing in our capacity to have sovereignty?
Right? Because before the project of European domination of the world, we had our own civilizations. Because the question becomes, what are you repairing?
Yeah.
And part of what happens is people think of the repair in terms of individual people, right? Black people are economically disadvantaged. How do we, and this, to me, this is the other frame, another way of putting what I've just kind of laid out. There's a difference between economic inclusion and sovereignty. So the version of reparations that we see out of FBA and some of the mainstream iterations of it is economic inclusion.
Absolutely.
Now, there are strategic and useful uses for policies around economic inclusion, whether it's universal basic income, whether it's things like Medicare for all, whether it's baby bonds. So like universal basic income, for those who aren't familiar, is the idea that everyone has some guaranteed money to get, let's say once a month, right? And that's an example of a policy that some people might describe as reparations. I think that's good policy. That's not reparations, right? That's more money for people to be included in the existing economic arrangement, right? Baby bonds. This is Sandy Darity, a scholar who I've actually had conversations with, a long time ago. And so baby bonds, the idea that every child that is born, that there should be money put in a bond, that it accumulates wealth over time, right? That's a public investment that they get access to when they turn 18, right? That's another example of a policy that people have said is reparations. And while that's good economic inclusion, it's good policy, that's not reparations, right? So a part of what happens is that when we don't have an understanding of kind of where I started, where our problem isn't about injustice, our problem is about sovereignty. It's about civilization, right? And so when I think about reparations, and again, emerging from the revolutionary Pan-Africanist Black nationalist worldview, if we're thinking about civilization, then examples of reparations are things like collective land acquisition and ownership, right? Because that's something that increases our capacity to operate as a sovereign people, right? Things like, collective co-ops, so the formerly incarcerated people, them having worker-owned cooperatives, so that they can get, contracts with city government where they're able to provide a living for themselves, but also run an institution they can pass along, as opposed to just an individual job or an individual gig. You think so. Those are a couple of examples of the distinction between what I'm describing as reparations, which is about investing in our capacity to practice sovereignty, right? Addressing ourselves to the unique harm that chattel slavery and white supremacy has done to our community, versus, again, economic inclusion, which is, again, and this is where when we talk about FBA and their insistence on cash payments being the basis for, like, that's their basis for, when I see it online, the base cash payments, right? And one of the things that for me is important to say is I think cash payments is on the table. I think cash payments is one thing right? That should be on the table in terms of discussions about what reparations looks like.
Yeah.
But I think the question is that if the primary thing is cash payments, we have not changed the economic arrangement. Black people are still with cash payments in a position where we're reliant on white monopoly capitalism as the basis for our ability to get jobs and move distribution of resources. And that's not what Malcolm X and the Black Panthers and Garvey, that's not what they were fighting for. Right. And again, that's not to say that those other economic inclusion things are bad. It's just not reparations. And the distinction is important.
So yeah, wow. So I appreciate that. You're bringing up a off the script question, I think. I don't have this one in there, but do you believe that what you're calling reparations, what you've identified as reparations, which I totally agree with, honestly, is something that we can get from the state?
Good question. So now this is going to get to the part about how we engage the system, right? Because this goes back to some people have described Pan-Africanists, and I think there's some legitimate criticism of Pan-Africanists who their approach to it is isolation, like withdrawing from the system, right? So a couple of things. One, politics is a site for the contestation for power and resources. That's what the arena of politics is. What we are taught and socialized into is that engaging in politics means that you believe in the legitimacy of the American nation state. I'm crystal clear that America, as Derek Bell once said, permanently racist, right? It's not an aberration, not a mistake. It's central feature to the American civil society. Du Bois and Black Reconstruction, where he says that in the chapter Back Towards Slavery, where after Reconstruction was an opportunity for America to demonstrate it could be a multiracial democracy, white labor sided with white capital, and then enforce the Black codes of terrorism against Black people. So I am clear that America as a nation state is not capable of producing justice for Black people. And my engaging the policy arena is not an attempt to make America better. So that's why when I talk about American politics, it's a site for the contestation for power and resources. So when we engage, because if we don't engage in the battle for the contestation for power and resources, we are ceding all of that power to our enemies, right? And so for us, for LBS, when we're engaging, legislation, we're engaged in the electoral political landscape, we're engaging from the vantage point that we are at war, right? Now, when you're engaged in warfare, I think part of the challenge sometimes, and this is where I have to, be critical of, my friends on the left, is that people confuse playing Madden with like actually playing football. You ever met someone who they're real good at Madden, so they think they're a genius at actually like playing football?
Okay.
And I believe that, unfortunately, I think a lot of my leftist friends, fall into that category, right? Because it's easy to talk shit online, right? It's easy to kind of talk about kind of in the abstract, like revolutionary political activity.
Yeah.
But it's another thing to like do it. Like, what does it take to be a formidable political force carrying the perspective that you carry? And one of the things I'm most proud of for LBS is that we're explicitly revolutionary Pan-Africanists. We don't hide it. It's not a thing where it's like, oh, I need to tone down my language so that they will pass my stuff. No, we are explicit about it because we have a strong track record of work in the community, and we weaponize our base in the community because we've been able to impact people getting elected, impact people getting their legislation passed. Like we can, it's like what Mao once said, politics is warfare. Warfare is politics is put out of the back room. Right. And so for us, when we're engaging in our political advocacy, we're engaging it from the vantage point that we're engaged in political warfare. Now we navigate the political space, right? So, I got a decent, personal relationship with the mayor. I've had, friendly interactions and conversations with the governor. But one of the things that both of them and all of the electeds are clear about what LBS is, that the Democratic Party is our political enemy, right? And that the Democratic Party is a white supremacist formation that we are a captured electorate of. So when we engage the political landscape, we engage it with that level of clarity, so that we can extract as many resources as we can for our community, and also be able to exert power in order to push the kinds of policy that can empty into our ability to practice sovereignty and self-determination. Okay,
that was great. So what's funny is I did Dr. Ball. I heard you said that before. I remember hearing you say "my friends on the left" before. So Dr. Ball hears you say it again. I think y'all may have had a discussion around this before, if I'm remembering correctly. So he puts "my friends on the left" and he puts the laughing emoji. So now with that, I think another off-script question that since Dr. Ball is still here. And you know, Dr. Ball is often one of those people that they struggle with, as far as him. I would call it, he does an excellent job of differentiating between that which is revolutionary or what liberation is, or what you may even call sovereignty, and which and I think he could probably agree with that, and what he called survival programs, like, so I'm curious though, and probably maybe I'll ask the question again a bit. So do you believe though that the state or the system or what have you, and I guess bringing these resources out will be enough to accomplish that?
So I would say we need a wide range of things, right? We need to build institutions, right?
Yeah.
We need to build relationships internationally, right? So there are a wide range. We need to have approaches to youth and human development that is like Africa centered and culturally rooted. So there are a wide range of things that we need as a people. What I am saying, though, is that engaging the political landscape is a necessary aspect of what we need to do as a people.
Okay.
Because if we do not engage it, then we're ceding all of that power to our enemies.
I see what you're saying. So it's kind of like, all right, we know the other side of the conversation, but let's not get so caught up in the other side of the conversation that we don't do these survival programs, that we don't do these things that we know we need to deal with everyday life, and perhaps can utilize that. We're not saying this is liberation. We're not saying I reached the promised land.
That's right.
I'm not saying.
I'm gonna give you an example.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're working on this session, we've been working on the past several legislative sessions, is Maryland is one of the few states that has the practice of automatically charging youth as adults, right? And so what ends up happening is that, and so things like gun possession, kid gets caught with a gun in Maryland, you automatically in the adult prison system. When the kids are in the adult prison system, they're not entitled to they can't go to school. They're not entitled to any mental health services, anything like that. They have to be, the federal policy is they have to be sight and sound away from adults, which means that functionally they're like in solitary confinement. And so you have all these youth in Maryland, right? 80% of the kids that are charged as adults are Black, right? And, 9 out of 10 of them are folks of color. And so what you have is you have a system in Maryland where in 2024, 529 young people were in adult prison facilities who were waved back down to the juvenile system, which means there's 529 youth who the system said didn't belong in adult prison. So, and they spend on average 180 days before they even have their cases adjudicated, right? But again, 80% of them end up getting waved back down. So we're working on a policy that would change those policies so that more of them start in the juvenile system, where they do have school, where they are entitled to mental health services, and that they have a quicker adjudication. Yeah. Now, that changing that policy is not revolution. But that's an important, in terms of the criminal justice system being weaponized against our community, it is an important policy to address. Yeah. Right? Because then that helps, because that's 529 youth that were in a state of dehumanization in the adult prison system. Yeah. Yeah. So it's consistent. With the politics of Black liberation. But I'm clear that if we, and that's a policy that has been, people are trying to change it for 15 years. Yeah. this might be the year that we actually change it.
Right.
Now, when it passes, and I'm a real inside baseball, one of the sponsor in the Senate, state Senate, is a Senator Will Smith, right? It's a brother from Montgomery County. Will Smith ain't no revolutionary, right? He's the sponsor on the Senate side of the bill. We work with him, right? Because that's a policy that would be good. Now, what I know is I suspect that he may have some higher aspirations for office.
Yeah.
He represents a very progressive county, in Montgomery County. So I'm not under the illusion that his inspiration for moving that bill is the same as mine.
Right.
But I'm clear that it is a policy that is harming our community.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying. It's like we're clear like what's revolutionary, what isn't.
Right.
But it's important for us to be clear that if we don't engage that space, then those kids are going to stay in the adult prison system.
You know what's interesting is, like, I think that's kind of like beautiful, right? I think that the way that you articulated is so needed, and the way that Dr. Ball articulated is so needed. And I'm saying why, because it's so easy to get caught, even unwittingly, on one end or the other. And I'm saying for those of us, because to me, I like that land too. I like, although I like real practical things, but part of the frustration comes, I think I'll share with our dear brother, Dr. Ball, I don't want to put words in his mouth, is that when I'm in these classrooms, everything is the opposite. It's all about policy. It's all about the grant. It's not like we can't use them. It's all about the grant. We're in social justice class, and they can't see anything out of a billable hour. So it's like, how are we going to get paid for revolution? And so now they get mad at me, right? So, and I know to them, it feels like I'm saying do all these, and I'm not even saying do things. I'll be like, look, go talk, like, align yourself with leaders of beautiful struggle, or I'll just be talking systemically, right? Let's say theoretically and stuff. And in their minds, it's so extreme that they think, so Dr. Winkler, what you want us to do? Take up guns? I said, did I say take? Right. So in their minds, I'm saying, well, that's not what I'm saying, but I'm not saying there's not times where that's not necessary either. But in their minds, they're like, look, we're working on PhDs. So the reality is I want to be able to get a job with 6 figures, and I want to do this. And, so they think I'm robbing them, but they're in the program, there's social justice.
So here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
I think that people got to make a decision about how they want to dedicate their life.
Yeah.
So like when I think about LBS, like it's something that I've had to dedicate my life to. There's a level of independence that we can be explicitly revolutionary and be of political consequence. But what it takes to build that, there's no job for that. Yeah. Right. I had to do the work of figuring out how to make it so that I could make a living doing this. So, because part of what this society does is everything is a job. Yeah. But the reality is Black liberation. There's no Black liberation job. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Now, there is work that people can do. That's good work. Yeah. Right. And so one can recognize how big the system is, understand the project of Black liberation, and make the individual just assessment and say, you know what, I don't want to fight the system for real. Like, not like that. I don't want to be, in the crosshairs of very powerful institutions. Right. Because I think for a lot of people, it's like a fun thought experiment. But as a person who, there are major institutions that are targeting us, that want us to fail, right? Yeah. And that if they could have tried a variety of things to try to destroy the organization, and being able to withstand that, like, that's a different way of living in the world. And I imagine for a lot of your students, what they're freaking out at is, shit, this society is a genocidal, white supremacist, imperialist entity. And knowing that what it would take to actually overthrow it, damn, that means I would have to like risk my livelihood. I'd have to like risk, like I have to put my life into it. It's acceptable for a person to say, I don't want to do that. Yeah. It's acceptable. Just say you don't want to do that.
But it's not even to that degree. It's even lighter. I mean, because one of my major arguments, and I'll get back on track here, but one of my major arguments is that again, I shared with you offline that many times they will, I think in training and counseling psychology and all these things, there's a certain disposition or way of being that is created. And it becomes a very fragile type of a way of existing.
Mm-hmm.
And then so what they become really good at calling social justice is calling out what they feel is an injustice on the individual level.
Mm-hmm.
So even in the office, though, even to that level, you know, like I'm not talking about the big boogeyman white man. We talking about policy in the office.
Mm-hmm.
So then we ain't talking about no guns. Mm-hmm. I'm saying you don't even want to push back. You're in a social justice program, but you don't even want to push back with your boss. You don't like, so what I'm saying is this thing is a different level. No, what do you want us to do? Not make a well, you want, at least let's talk about some change within the system. Look, if you ain't talking about change within the system or changing the system altogether, I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, you know what's funny about, I mean, that goes back to the Madden versus playing football analogy. And this makes me sound like an old man. I'll be 39 in May.
Mm-hmm.
These motherfuckers are soft, man.
Oh God! I just told somebody today I won't say that because my training won't allow me to say that.
Soft.
But
and let me say,
it's starting to get closer to my tongue.
And I'm gonna say why I'm saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that goes back to what I was saying. People choose what they want for their life.
Mm-hmm.
But you are accountable for the responsibilities and the perks.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what happens is people are socialized into thinking that they got rights.
Mm-hmm. That's it,
right? They socialize into thinking like, if someone violates my rights, something is going to have to be done about that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I say is, the extent to which rights are enforced is the extent to which you can enforce them.
Mm.
What mechanism do you have to make a person live up to whatever agreement? If you and I have an agreement, and you like, I'm gonna take your money, but I ain't gonna give your shit back. What do we see in our community sometimes when people do that? They got to take matters into their own hands, right? And that's not something that we condone in, but I'm just saying that as an example of like, that is a very privileged, cloistered life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I find a lot of the social justice, nonprofit people to have this really cloistered,
nonprofit.
You know what I'm saying? Like, they got rights, and it's like,
that's it.
Somebody violates your rights, and so what you gonna do about it?
It's exactly. Honestly, I had this talk in my class last evening. Like, we're gonna have to do some capacity building here.
Yeah,
because this is not what it is. You want to talk social justice, but you think that your feelings really matter,
and they don't.
Like, I mean, I get
as
it.
A human being,
yes.
As a human, your feelings matter.
Yes.
But when you talk about confronting systems of
exactly,
power,
they don't care about that. They're not worried about that. And if you're going to fight, you're not going to give pushback and not receive something back.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
Like, that's why I said we also need to learn history. We the same students you talking about in the playing Madden. They're the same students that critique King, but they did a lot of capacity building in the civil rights era. Mm-hmm. You know, they might have looked passive, but I don't know what you call what I'm talking about. This is below passive.
I mean, they got beat up, they got spat on, they got
the
whole, you know what I mean?
And they were trained, and they were going through training to learn how to deal with those things.
And there's no version of, and that's the thing. I think people want versions of social justice or liberation that don't require that.
Yeah,
and that's why it takes me to the like, the shit is soft, because where else do that? Where do people do that?
You know what I'm gonna do? Because I said it's at the tip of my tongue. But the way I'll make it appropriate as a therapist is that I'll quote Dayvon Love. I say, my brother, I wouldn't say it this way, but my brother Dayvon Love says, what you say?
These motherfuckers are soft.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to just have the clip in my pocket. But let me go to the next question, brother Love. Help me understand, if you can also pass. Help me understand the logic behind the idea that someone must adopt a specific label, such as FBA, ADOS, freedmen. Let me make sure I say freedmen, because that's the escape clause, to qualify for reparations is the name doing the work, or is it the historical lineage?
So again, I just got to reiterate just the analytical unseriousness of the FBA moniker. And let me. So to your question, qualifying for reparations, that assumes a certain framework for how reparations is dispersed. And the challenge I have with the conversations I see of FBA, and let me also just make a note. I had an engagement online with someone a few months ago who identifies as FBA, and they were critical of my criticism of FBA. And so it was a respectful back and forth. And one of the things where they landed, they said that it's difficult to nail down what FBA is because it's a movement that was created on the internet. Now, I ended the engagement. I didn't want to keep going back and forth, but the admission that the movement originates online, to me, what that says is that it's not real.
Okay.
Right. The internet is about projecting what people are doing. The internet is not a real place. So part of why I'm saying that in the context of this, the question of like qualifying for reparations, as a person who does actual policy, who has moved policy, moved distribution of resources, the question of qualifying for reparations, I've not heard a sophisticated argument from anybody in FBA about the infrastructure for how you would even do a cash payment system, right? Because you got it like, all right, so does it sit in a public agency? Does it sit in a quasi-public agency? Is it means tested? Is it checks? Is it a tax credit? Like there are all these things that if a person was serious about like the policy and actually making it happen. And I even noticed in California when there was these bills to establish a freedmen's agency to dispense reparations payments. And again, to me, it's like, so you want to invest in the development of an entirely new agency. Is it a government, quasi-public? Entirely new agency to give out money. Is that the most efficient way? And if we simulating conversations about it, if we are going to do cash payments, like I said, I think it's on the table, then maybe it's a tax credit, right? So maybe instead of a lump sum of $30,000, maybe every year you get $1,000 tax credit.
Yeah, you
don't need a whole new agency for that. It's easier, it's more efficient. So and then I don't hear the considerations about the fact that the jurisprudence of the Supreme Court, of this current regime of the Supreme Court, has made it difficult for race-based remedies. So then the question for FBA is, well, then how do you get around that? Now, LBS, we have a proposal, one prong of our reparations proposal that would include a tax credit for Black people in Maryland. And the way that one will qualify is if you're a descendant of a person who attended a segregated Black school. That is legally race neutral, right? Because it is something that you don't necessarily have to be. It's not saying you got to be Black to get the cash, but you're descendant of a person that attended a school that only Black people could go to. So what it does is that it survives the Supreme Court. It survives someone taking that law to court and it getting struck down.
And it's easier to track your lineage back that way.
Right. And for us, that was one prong of our larger reparations proposal. So I bring it up to say that, to me, that's a serious conversation about, okay, how are we going to make it happen?
Yeah.
I don't hear that from FBA folk. I don't hear a sophisticated conversation. We have a bill this session that won't pass, but it's a bill that sometimes you put in a bill to help educate the committee to start the momentum. So we have a bill in right now. What the bill does is that it taxes the endowments of institutions with endowments above $2 billion. And then it puts the tax on those endowments into a reparations fund. And then it has a series of appointments that are made who preside over this reparations fund. Now, the purpose of that is because the question that people ask sometimes, well, how do you pay for reparations?
Yeah.
And even I see myself as an extension of the kind of radical Pan-Africanists that kind of have brought the reparations movement to this point. But one of the weaknesses in their advocacy is they don't have good answers to that question. When they say, well, where's the money come from? The response is usually, well, you got money for this and that, so you should have money for this. And what we say is, no, we're going to develop specific policies that can answer the question as to how it gets funded. So that's a bill we put in the Maryland General Assembly. Now, again, I don't hear this level of conversation in terms of how to implement reparations from any of the FBA, advocates or folks that I see.
I got a question for you.
Yep.
So this was coming up. I saw you on Sister Karen Hunter's, or I saw me. I think I was looking for the long form, but I'm not sure if I found it. But I think one of the things I was thinking about was this FBA argument about, it's so funny. So one of the reasons why I thought to reach out to you, I thought to reach out to you for many reasons already, but is that the argument was that the governor of Maryland, who is Jamaican, stopped the bill or what have you. He put a veto or whatever. You'll say the proper language for me. And he's Jamaican, and that's why he did it. And now, from my little understanding, even though his reasoning could have been something much more than what he stated, it sounded to me like he was trying to be down. Like, we tired of these bills. We tired of these what do they call it? These studies. And the irony behind that, I think is that they also say that. That's one of their talking points, that we tired of studies. Now, I don't know what you do with it, but my other point was that they're also saying, see, Pan-Africanists are the ones that support people like him, and I'm saying, well, I put out something, I don't know in which format, that said, well, I know a Pan-Africanist group amongst other groups that are here who actually pushed back against that and brought it to where we find it now. So do what you do with that.
Yeah. So a few things.
One, and that Pan-Africanist group being you, So
a few things. One, many of the platform, when I've, particularly national platforms online, when I've talked about reparations, the comments are like flooded with FBA stuff. And I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of like, oh, he's a tether and all that stuff. And one of the things, and look, I knew the governor before he was governor, had conversations with him before he ran, met with him the day before he vetoed it. And even though him and I are fiercely on opposite sides of this issue, I just find it, to me, it's just kind of gross to just be lobbing these kind of, insults, at who I believe to be a self-respecting black man. You know what I'm saying? And so I find like the name calling just immature and unserious, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I do believe that there are, I think I've alluded to it several times, I think there are some legitimate criticisms of some tendencies within Pan-Africanism, right? And I think, but it's important that those criticisms are in context because, and again, FBA was created online. So that's all I need to know. I don't, until I see something more serious, like something that I can see that is something that has been impacted by work that those folks have done. It's like, okay, criticizing Pan-Africanists because they don't do stuff. You guys show me your work before you can even talk to me about that, right? And then thirdly, so then I'm gonna talk more specifically about what happened in Maryland in terms of the reparations stuff. So we've been pushing reparations for a while. In fact, our first reparation policy, when the state of Maryland decided it was going to legalize recreational cannabis, we worked to establish the Community Repair and Reinvestment Fund. 35% of the revenues from recreational cannabis goes into a fund. Each jurisdiction gets a percentage of it. That percentage determined by that jurisdiction's contribution to statewide cannabis possession charges. So the cannabis guy hit the hardest, get the most. And then each jurisdiction determined how they spend their portion of it. Baltimore, pursuant to the legislative mandate of determining how they spend it, established the Baltimore Reinvestment and Reparations Commission, where each council person will nominate someone. Mayor then appoints the nominee to serve on this commission that'll determine where those resources go. That commission was appointed formally in December of 24. And so they're in the process of building the infrastructure, and other jurisdictions in the state have built similar kinds of frameworks. So that for us, in terms of reparations, that was our first major policy victory as it relates to reparations, both at state level and local. So we have been pushing right. So as the governor comes into office in 2022, so he won the election in 22, becomes governor in 23. And our practice is that we meet with the Speaker of the House or their chief of staff, the Senate president or their chief of staff, and now that we had a Democratic governor, the governor's office. So in 23 and 24, we had a conversation with the governor's team about our approach to reparations and sent a proposal that had like specific ways of implementing reparations. We were told by the team that that because of the budget deficit, that they didn't want to make any commitments to the budget. So we were like, cool, because we wanted to try to find a way to work with them, right? We didn't want to adversary relationship with them, at least to the extent that we could try to not have one. And so we then worked with the Legislative Black Caucus, and that's where the bill to establish a commission that would study the harms of enslavement and racial oppression, all of that, but most importantly, to give recommendations as to how to implement a reparations policy in Maryland. And I want to emphasize that particular point, because when people talk about commissions, and the governor, I think, cleverly characterized the commission as a study to just study what has happened to Black people. Right. And he listed other studies that have been done where they have studied inequality, injustice, like that's been studied. But what has never happened is a commission that will produce recommendations on how to implement a reparations policy. So when people say, I just want the cash, or what I say to people is, well, the question becomes, how do you implement it? Right. And that's where a commission is useful. Right. Because you want people to then be able to say, okay, this is exactly how you do it. So if we're talking about cash, okay, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to have, the housing community development is going to anchor it. They're going to means test it. They're going to, this is the application they're going to use. Here's the kind of personnel. Like, those are things that if you're being serious about reparations, you have to have answers to those questions of how you implement it. Right. The policy I mentioned that we're putting in the General Assembly about the taxation on endowments, that's an example of a specific kind of policy that would make sense to come out of a commission to study, well, how much money are we going to get from these endowments? Right. What is the percentage? Like, are we going to tax them all the interest that they earn on the endowments? Are we going to tax them at 50%? Right. What are the criteria for moving those public dollars? How are we going to incentivize collective enterprises, right? Or things that are about investing in Black people collectively, as opposed to like individual, making individual Black people wealthy. Those are the things that a commission is helpful for if we're taking serious what it means to implement a reparations policy.
Can you explain for us what actually a commission is?
So a commission in this context is a legislatively established body whose responsibility it is to provide a report to the legislature on the actions they should take on a particular issue. So I'll give an example in a different area. The state of Maryland established a Juvenile Justice Reform Council in 2021. And the purpose of that was to look at the juvenile justice system, look at the inequalities, and figure out what the policy recommendations would be. What emerged from that was that Maryland was incarcerating and continues to incarcerate the highest population of its children of any state in the United States besides Alabama. So then they made changes, and they said that if you're 13 and younger, you cannot be prosecuted for a crime unless it's a felony, unless it's a violent crime. Right. The idea being that we're not going to prosecute a 10-year-old, right, for getting into a fight. Right. We're not going to prosecute an 11-year-old for stealing a candy bar. And what they found was that the system was tracking a bunch of youth into the system that were doing that on those kinds of things. That were better served outside the system. So they established a commission, came up with legislative recommendations, and those recommendations were implemented by the legislature. right? So because it's complex. So it's helpful to have a commission to look at all of it and then say to the legislature, okay, this is how you address that problem.
Yeah. Hey, Brother Ty, could you just hit the arrow button at the bottom? You see the arrow button by that one? Yeah. Just hit the new comments. Yeah, hit that. Thank you. That'll be do it. So thank you, brother. So yeah. So I appreciate that. And so family, before our dear brother Love gets out of here, if you want to come in, I shared the link. I think is shared. I'll share it again. I think it's actually in the holding spot or what have you. I appreciate you, Brother Love, for this breakdown. I have a few more questions. Do you believe that reparations must be pursued strictly through lineage-based claims, or is there room for a globally unified strategy that still honors specific historical harms? And can it be a both and or somewhere in between?
So I mean, I reject the notion that reparations should be based on being able to trace your lineage, because it's it's difficult to do that. I think that there are some aspects of reparations that, again, cash payments, right? And the question is what form. But I think that cash payments alone is not reparations.
Okay.
Right. Again, as I said before, reparations is about economic sovereignty, restoring our capacity as a people to operate as a sovereign people.
Yeah.
That is something that, while there are things that we do here in the United States, that's a global endeavor. System of white supremacy is a global system.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so that is a global endeavor, so that we should be coordinating what we do here, right, with our sisters and brothers in the diaspora, with our family in the diaspora, in order to ensure that we're clear that we may get something here in the United States for Black people, but if you don't tackle the global system of white supremacy, then we're going to continue to be subjugated as a people across the board. A couple of things with that. I think a reality is that part of the global system of white supremacy and colonialism is the notion of Black people being inherently inferior. As long as the continent of Africa is in the state that it is in, right, in terms of the economic exploitation and the political disorganization and disunity and just colonialism, as long as Africa is subject to colonialism, then the ceiling for which Black people can aspire is low. You know what I'm saying? Because many of the stigmas, the beliefs about engaging Black people, right, whether it's, business, whether it's political, if Africa being, because the stigmas about Africa emanate to all across the globe, right? So that's one thing. And then the second thing is that, we think about the civil rights movement, right? And a lot of people in mainstream society talk about the successes of the civil rights movement. The reality is that in the context of the Cold War and the emergence of African heads of states who were engaged in revolution against the colonial regimes in those African nations, created the pressure that made the gains of the civil rights movement possible, right? And that's often what gets left out of the picture, right? That it wasn't like, yes, the work of the civil rights workers, and those civil rights organizations and the variety of other folks that were agitating, that the only reason that was successful is because of the work that was happening globally and the connections that Black people were making globally to push on the system to make the concessions that it made, right? So this is global, engaging the global system and engaging our family across the diaspora. That is what has worked. Like, that is what has worked to get us gains, right?
So you say that's what's worked.
That is what it is. Not that it's not the civil rights movement, the narrative, the kind of heroic narrative of the civil rights movement, where these people who were nonviolent, face water hoses, sicked on by dogs, sit-ins, freedom rides. Yeah. All of that work is important. Yeah. But the only reason that it was successful, to the extent that it was successful, was because of what was happening globally. That one of the best stories I've ever heard from A. Peter Bailey, who was the editor of the Blacklash, which was the OAAU's newspaper. And so I forget which of his books he talks about this. I think in his latest book, Malcolm's Strategic Pan-Africanism, in his latest book, he says that, so Malcolm went to these different African heads of states, didn't participate, but was there at the OAU conference. And so Peter Bailey then documents a incident that happened on the floor of the UN, where there were some white nuns in the Congo, or I forget where they were. I think it was the Congo, who there was some talk about the United States invading in order to save these white people that were in the Congo. And I think an ambassador from Guinea, and I believe an ambassador from another African country, stood up and said that if you invade the Congo, what is to stop us from providing military assistance to Black people in the South, given the terrorism that white folks are engaged in to Black people in the United States? And he says that the U.S. ambassador heard that and was astounded, and the conversation didn't come back up again. That's the work of Malcolm, going to those different heads of state, talking about what's happening to Black people and building that consensus such that they would, just a mere statement of military intervention on behalf of Black people in the United States by these African countries. That is the context that helped to make, to the extent that the civil rights movement was successful and there were gains that we got, it was because of the work that was happening globally. Right? There's no way that you get the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act and the Fair House. You don't get that stuff without the global context. And unfortunately, a lot of the FBA folks, they just don't know enough history to know that is in fact that is a fact.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. But before we bring them up, I'm just going to say it's Black History Month, and
most people, when we say Afro-American, they think only of the Negroes in the United States. But they don't realize that 2/3 of Brazil consists of people of African blood, which means they're also Afro-American because Brazil is in South America. And in all of these, many of these countries in South America and Central America, and even in Canada, they are heavily populated with people whose ancestors came from Africa. So when you total up the number of Afro-Americans, real Afro-Americans, in the Western Hemisphere, there are perhaps 100 million. And if these people ever unite among themselves, not only is it necessary for the Afro-Americans in the United States to be organized, but it's also necessary for the Afro-Americans in the Caribbean, or the Afro-Cubans, the Afro-Brazilians. It's necessary for all of them to be organized. And then once they are organized in each place, we have to organize among ourselves so that the Afro-American in the United States will be working in conjunction in a coordinated program with those who are in Cuba, and those in Brazil, and those in Venezuela, and those throughout the Caribbean, and Haiti, and in the West Indian Islands. And in this way, we actually get strength. And it's not an accident that there's no organization existing in the Western Hemisphere that's designed toward that end. It would be a direct threat to imperialism as it really exists, and to colonialism as it exists in the West. And one of the things that's going to help to bring this about is the independence of Africa. And one of the only reasons that we in the West have never organized, we have hated our image and our African image. And because Africa has been in the hands of people who have created an image of Africa that's negative and hateful. And it has been hateful to us. We haven't wanted to identify with it. But now that Africa is getting independent and in a position to create its own image, and it's a positive image, those of us in the West look at the African image and see how positive it is, and we begin to identify with it. We become proud of Africa, and we become proud of our African blood, our African heritage. And this is what is beginning to make the Africans in the Western Hemisphere today develop more race pride, and as this race pride develops, then it has the tendency to make us want to unite together and work together. And your Western imperialists and colonialists consider this to be a grave threat, more threat than communism or Marxism or socialism or anything else. The Africanism is what they consider to be the real threat.
Africanism is still a threat. Black unity, global black unity is still a threat. Us doing business together, us doing commerce together, us building together, spiritual unity amongst our people, cultural exchanges amongst our people, institution building amongst our people is still considered a threat.
Courtesy of Baba Amen. Just had to, I wanted to share that. And we, Brother Love, got a little bit of time for some guests.
Probably got like about 10 more minutes.
He got about 10 more minutes. So I know y'all a little long-winded. For those of there, let's make it short. Brother Shabazz, what it is, cuz.
What's going on? Peace. How you doing, cuz?
I'm all right. What's working?
Well, I think it has been covered, but I wanted to ask Brother Dayvon, from what he has said about his the way he looks at reparations, does he include the works and the things that were sort of like set forth by Dr. William Darity, and the way he sort of like discussed how to go about and how to formulate and monetarily and structurally for the community as well?
So I think two things about, I appreciate the question, brother. Two things. One, I believe that Darity does not come from a Pan-Africanist worldview. What he
Correct, he doesn't.
Right. What he did was that he did develop or come up with the ideas of specific policies, right, that he describes would in effect be reparations, right? So I mentioned earlier baby bonds as an example that he gives. I think that that's good policy. I don't think that is reparations in the way that he has conceptualized it, because his argument is baby bonds for everybody, right, who are low income, right, and that would disproportionately then go to Black people, right? Again, good policy, not reparations. Now, so that's the first thing. The second thing is what he did was he developed like what the policies would be, but what he doesn't do is have a strategy for how those policies will come into fruition. So all of what he describes are federal government policy. And what is clear to me is that these aren't policies that are viable, right, in terms of the engaging the federal policymaking landscape. And I've listened to him, and I've not heard him talk about what the pathway is, because that's actually not his expertise. Like his expertise isn't in like navigating the political landscape. So I do give him credit for coming up with examples of specific policies for us to think about and discuss and to say, okay, so again, the baby bonds example, I don't think that's reparations. I think that's good policy. But I think for me, the imperative of the reparations movement in our current time, given the fact that we've moved away from centering the advocacy primarily on the federal level, is how do we implement it? What are examples of the kinds of policies that we can actually implement and pass? And I think that's the conversation that I think that is missing largely from Darity's analysis.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
That's food for thought.
All right, brother KP. My dear brother don't have much longer, so I know you are a scholar of scholars. So make it brief, and we'll go home on that one.
I will try, dear brother. And again, thanks for all you do, Mr. Love. I happen to totally agree with your analysis of the broadening and internationalization of the call for reparations being contextualized by like movements globally, right? Relative civil rights was able to be successful precisely because of things going on relative to the third world, the Black world, and its interrelations with the so-called first world at the time, right? Struggles post-World War II, Cold War dynamics, leveraging the success of the civil rights movement, right? In fact, if you look at old documentary like Eyes on the Prize, for instance, and you go look at the Little Rock 9 video coverage of that, you'll see students in the Little Rock 9 openly talking to reporters and saying things like, If this kind of treatment continues, you push a guy like me to go towards that other side, that Soviet side, that socialist and communist side, right? So it was almost an example of what you're saying, right? To get those civil rights movement at the time. That being the case, and here comes the question. Sorry for being long-winded. Given that reparations, at least popularly, has gained a more broad, perhaps even a louder voice among the Black community, whether it's expressed, more expertly or less so. The timing. What do you think about what international situation would there have to be in order for reparations for African Americans or Blacks in West Africa? What would have to happen in order for Blacks to gain that kind of leverage again? I don't know if that's
yeah. No, I appreciate.
I don't know if I expressed that correctly. Yeah.
No, I appreciate the question. I would say that, I think it's important for us as a people to pay attention to kind of the political currents globally, because there are ways that those things impact us. It's important for us to see it. So I'm going to give a few examples of what I think exists currently, and then I'll say a little bit about what I think that means for what we should do. You think about the Sahel states, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, right? And that is an important intervention in West Africa, where Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso, has basically said, we're kicking the French out, right? We're going to renegotiate the deals with, minerals. Now, it's a military coup that established, his leadership and the leadership of the other people, the other folks in the Sahel states. So it's complicated, right? But that's an example of an anti-imperialist movement in West Africa that I think it's important for us to pay attention to and to think of, and for us to give some thought to, what are some ways that we can be supportive of what's happening there. And I'm gonna come back to that. Another example, I think you look at South Africa, and that's a place where I pay pretty close attention to their political landscape. You have the ANC, which I would describe as let's say the equivalent of the Democratic Party here in the United States, right? The Party of Mandela, who this past election was the first time since the end of apartheid that the ANC did not receive a 50% plus one majority vote in the country. So they had to do a government of national unity. They had to form a coalition government, and they had to pick who they were going to build a coalition with. Now, unfortunately, they did a coalition government with the DA, the Democratic Alliance, which is I would say the equivalent of the Republican Party, instead of the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, which are explicitly leftist, Pan-Africanists, the MK Party, which is a offshoot of the ANC, and there's complicated politics there. But those parties are to the left of the ANC. And so it was an opportunity for the ANC to move the kind of political worldview of South Africa to the left that it did not. But the EFF continues to pressure the ANC, right? And in fact, one example of success that the ANC had as impression of the South African government is that for years, the ANC had been saying they're going to pass this policy of land expropriation without compensation. So white folks own about 85% of the land in South Africa. And the ANC was supposed to deliver on seizing some of that land and redistributing it to the Black masses. But the EFF made such a stink about it and such impressed about it, in their parliament so strongly that in 2024, they did pass a policy, right, that enhances the ability for the government in South Africa to seize land from white folks and redistribute it to Black people. So those, and then I'll give one other example. You think about like places in South America. I think Hugo Chavez was one of the most important political figures of the 21st century because he was organizing against U.S. imperialism, building a coalition in South America, Central and South America, to build a counter to the U.S. domination of global finance capital. So you take all those things, right? And then we see, Chavez was killed. Maduro took his place. We see what Trump just did to Maduro, right? I see the attacks on Maduro as something that's an attack on the fight against U.S. imperialism. It's important for Black people to oppose. And part of what we have is the Democratic Party will say things like, well, Maduro was a dictator, blah, 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 which demonstrates their lack of commitment to challenging imperialism and Black liberation. So all of that to say this, that I think that there is existing opportunity in the range of different things that are happening globally to Black people and people that are allies to Black folks, for us to think about how we then can use what we do here to benefit some of those movements. So, for example, U.S. foreign policy in terms of global capitalism, one of the things that would help Black people here would be to weaken the power of transnational corporations that go to these countries, pay slave wages, right? But what if we created a foreign policy that was about investing both in local manufacturing here, right? So that we own the thing, all our clothes, instead of getting them from cheap labor in India and Pakistan, that it was manufactured here, and developing policies that will require, governments and incentivizing private citizens to purchase from local manufacturing. That puts us as a community in a position to have more resources to then support some of these global efforts, or puts us in a position where we can do more business, right? More business with these other, in places in South Africa, Burkina Faso, we can do business such that we can actually collaborate, right? So I think, to the question, I think there is that opportunity, right? There are revolutionary movements that are happening around the globe, both on the continent of Africa and other places in the world. I think those of us that are engaged in the fight, just need to be conscientious about what are the ways that we can support what they're doing, such that if they're successful, one of the things Hugo Chavez did was he worked with Danny Glover and Harry Belafonte and sent oil to folks in Brooklyn who didn't have heat. One of the things that he did when Hurricane Katrina happened, Venezuela was the first support internationally that was offered to Black folks during Katrina. So again, there are opportunities. We just got to know about it, and we need to include it in how we think about how we move.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. It sounds like you're calling for a version of Trans-Africa to reemerge then, as a Western African-American based internationalist lobbying unit to put pressure on the system over here so it can free up more success for our Black brothers in the diaspora, whether it be in South America, the Caribbean, and or Africa. And I think that relationship is actually synchronic, meaning that to the degree that diasporic Black forces are able to gain economic, political, heck, even military strength overseas, the leverage increases for Black people in the United States to then have a backing, or to be able to approach governance domestically with more impact, with more causal impact. So I agree. But now which side needs to lead or go first?
KP, I don't know if he has the time. I got
a few more minutes.
He got a few more minutes. All right, I'm gonna let him.
It's okay.
But no, go ahead. I'm gonna let him tell you when he got a roll. Go ahead.
And hey, some of these conversations probably shouldn't be done on YouTube, because
you gonna jump in there?
Yeah, what I was
watching.
Yeah, because what I was gonna say is that, because my response to what you were just saying is yes, and to do all those things is complicated. And so part of the work to do is for people in where they are to build out how they do it and start small. Like, I think one of the mistakes that people make sometimes is people start too big. Start small, right? And when you start small and you build over a long period of time, then you have a sturdier foundation so that you can do the big things. Like LBS, this is our 16th year in existence, right? It's taken that long for us to get to this point, but now the power base is so sturdy, then we can tackle the big stuff.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And you know, something interestingly funny came up in my mind. Somebody need to tell the Prince of Pan-Africanism to start small. But hey, so family, KP as usual, I appreciate you calling in. Brother Cuz, I appreciate you. Proper Perspective, go check them out on the station. Family, make sure you thumb up this video. You like this video. Appreciate you too. Make sure you thumb up this video, like this video. Make sure you leave some comments for you Pan-African people. I tell you, shy Pan-Africanists. I know y'all don't like to get into stuff like Brother Dayvon said when he came. He was like, you know, I just ignore that stuff. I'm just saying, you know, I know you watching. You know, I know who be watching. I talk to the people. The street, I got my ear to the street. Just put a red and a black and a green or some type of thing. What is it? Ungawa? How do you say? Ungawa, something. Put something in the chat. You know, you don't have to attack FBA. They our brothers and sisters. We love them. But nonetheless, just let your presence be felt. Brother Love, is there any closing words or any final type of things that you know you want to kind of leave for the people?
So for the people that want to support LBS's work, lbsbaltimore.com, LBS Baltimore, all your relevant social media. You know, if one of the things that allows us to do what we do is that we're independent Black political organization. We're not a nonprofit, we're LLC, right? So we're not reliant on philanthropy. And so, you know, but what empowers us is there are over 300 people that give us money monthly for us to do the work that we do. So I can talk this way and engage the political landscape because we have a business model that's reliant on our community as the basis for our power. So I encourage people, if they like what they heard, to sign up, go on our website, be a sustainer. If you can't do that, sign up to be on our listserv. We send out action alerts, right? So people we give you the language to tell you to send an email or a message to your elected official. It may seem small, right? But it makes a big difference. There are times when I'm in Annapolis, a legislator will pull me aside. They'll say, Dayvon, I saw all these emails, man. What you want? What did it take to get y'all to stop? Right. So those things seem small, but please, if you can't be a sustainer, do both. You can be a sustainer, but also sign up to be the listserv. When you sound out these action alerts, we're trying to stop this practice of automatically charging youth as adults in Maryland. That's one of our biggest things. And so, you know, I hope that, you know, you all can sign up to support the work that way.
I appreciate it. Appreciate all the work you do. And I appreciate you coming by. Hope we can make this a ongoing project. Dr. Ball, I know you in there too. You know, you gotta be special. Dr. Ball stayed the whole time fighting in the chat room, Shabozy or whatever. But nonetheless, what I want to say is, I also got to change my card on file as a what do you call sustainer. I got to update my card. But anyway, so yeah, go ahead and make sure you support the great work they're doing, because sometimes we can't be everywhere, but we definitely need Dayvon Loves and the Lawrence Grand Prix, and I don't know the other people's names all the time, but the LBS family to continue to do that work, and as they are fighting for us on various levels. So family, make sure you like, share, subscribe, and until next time, family, make sure you tune back in. Make sure you share this video. Make sure you do all the things, share comments underneath, all that type of thing. Until next time, next week, 7 o'clock, same time, same space. Peace and power.
When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Black and I'm proud. When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim you're African. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you.
Don't put on me.
When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim you're African. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back. Black and I'm proud. Claim you're African. Black and I'm proud. I'm telling you. Become a part of it. Embrace it. 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 When you claim you're Africanist, you're going to get your mind back.